Now, I understand why people stare. I do. I get it. I'm guilty of it as well. I mean, we're seeing something new usually when we end up staring at something our brain is just trying to figure out, is trying to recognize. So I understand why it happens. It doesn't mean it wasn't frustrating for me. Now, that's not what was leading me to hopelessness. What was leading me to hopelessness was the fact that young children were obviously staring as well, but they were doing much more than that. They were absolutely terrified of me. Like, as soon as they saw me in my wheelchair, they would hide behind their parents, or they would run away. And I got to the point where I was like, Rick, why do you even go out in public anymore? Just stay home. Like, you know, if you leave the house, you're going to scare a child. Just stay home. It's safer there. I knew I couldn't do that, but I also didn't want to go out in public. I mean, that's pretty hopeless when you don't want to leave your own home ever. But like I said, I knew I had to go out in public. I didn't know how to get through this on my own. I truly needed somebody in my life to help me get through this. Well, one day, I went to a restaurant, and I was sitting at a table with my brother, and there was a table across from us. And at this table was a family. In the family was a little girl, 5 or 6 years old, the perfect age for a kid to be afraid of me. They were old enough to recognize that I was scary. Well, this little girl was staring at me, obviously. And I could also tell that she was afraid of me. Now, her grandfather was sitting right next to her. And he saw that she was staring at me. So he leaned down and quietly said to her, "Go say hi to him." So he wanted his granddaughter to come over and say hello to me. And she didn't want to do that. Obviously, she was afraid of me. So she didn't. Well, he said it again. "Go say hi to him." Now, this time she did start to come over. I didn't want her to come all the way over to my table. I knew how uncomfortable she was already. So when she got halfway over to my table, as nicely as I could say to her, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" But as soon as I said that, as soon as that first word came out of my mouth, she stopped dead in her tracks, like she saw a monster. And she turned around and she ran back to her grandpa as fast as she could. I'm like, you know what, Rick? Just get used to it. Just deal with it. Just figure it out, because this is the way it will always be. Kids are always going to be afraid of you. I mean, the problem was I had no idea how to deal with it. I had no idea how to figure it out. I've never been through anything like this before. I had no idea how to get that hope back on my own. I didn't think I could. Well, that little girl, she ran back to her grandpa. She got back to him and she looked at him and she said, "Grandpa, he's really nice. He's really nice." That is not what I thought she was going to say. That's not what most of you thought she was going to say. I mean, I thought for sure she was running away from me because she was terrified of me. I thought for sure she was going to get back to her grandpa and say, "Grandpa, he's really scary," like most kids would have. But nope. In that moment of hopelessness for me, that little girl, who again was only 5 or 6 years old, she came over to me. She dumped a bucket of hope on me. And when she did that, she changed my life forever. That's an absolute guarantee. That little girl changed my life forever. She had no idea that she had hope inside of her that she could give to me. She had no idea that I even needed hope. But she was still able to give it to me. And truly, that just proved to me that we all have hope inside of us. We were born with it. And we can give it to other people. And when we give it to other people, we might change their life forever. The big difference is she didn't recognize that I needed hope. But you're old enough. You're smart enough to recognize it. You see kids every single day. You know these kids well. It's the end of the year. You've been together for a long time. You see them in the hallways. You know when they're dealing with something tough, when maybe they're feeling hopeless. And a lot of the times, we just walk by those kids because it's easier. We can't just walk by those kids. We need to recognize what they're dealing with. We need to recognize that we have hope inside of us. And truly, that's why I'm here today, to let you all know that you have hope inside of you that you can give to other people.
All right, students, I'm back with my man Rick Yarish, and we just talked about the first half of what leads someone to hopelessness, this lack of meaning or purpose in your life, and you got to hear how Rick kind of found his meaning again, purpose, in what he does with Sweethearts and Heroes and in his injury. But the other half, Rick, is this thing called human acceptance. We know that 170,000 kids will skip school every day in this country because they're afraid to be in school. Now, when we talk to kids, we know they're just a bunch of pack animals. They care what their friends think. They care what other people are going to say. And it's really tough when a kid doesn't feel accepted or they feel lonely. And we know the worst form of torture in humanity is isolation. And when kids do it to themselves, it leads to hopelessness. And you did it to yourself at one point.
So we talked about significance and the fact that I lost that, and that's what led me to losing hope. But I also lost acceptance. And I didn't realize it that day that I was on fire in Iraq, but I realized it later. When I got out of the hospital and kids were terrified of me, every single one of them, I lost that acceptance in the world that I lived in. And it was a hard world to live in when you don't have acceptance. Now just imagine yourself not having that acceptance. Imagine the kids around you that probably are feeling that way, that they don't have acceptance, and they're like, the acceptance that I lost led me to basically not want to leave my own home. I mean, that's pretty crazy to think about. So just imagine that kid who doesn't have that acceptance, who needs that acceptance, because it's truly what we need to survive. We need significance and we need acceptance. What can we do? What can you do to show that kid who might not feel that acceptance, the acceptance to maybe change their life forever?
All right, students, it's time to circle up and talk about the second half of what might lead a kid to hopelessness, this thing called human acceptance, and what responsibility you personally have in making young people feel accepted. So get in those circles and let's talk about those things that might make kids not feel accepted, and most importantly, the things that we all can do to make people feel accepted.